2020 brought with itself a record number of Americans going out and purchasing pistols and rifles to be better prepared to protect themselves. And as these Americans get on this journey of building or buying maybe their first rifle, it opens up a whole new world to them where they have to try to figure out which accessories they want to run on these guns to be better prepared, to perform better, and to be able to defend themselves better in all situations. And one of the topics that a lot of people tend to get overwhelmed with is selecting the right optic for their needs. And while today's not an extensive video going over every single optic on the market and diving deep into each one individually, we will do that in the future. Today's episode of Box to Bullseye is simply diving into a brand new to the market red dot that we've personally never used. We're going to unbox it in front of you guys, take you along the journey with us as we kind of figure out, is this an optic that's viable for a lot of people, and how does it stack up with the other previous offerings of this particular model? The red dot that I am referring to today is the SPARC Solar from Vortex. Let's dive into it. As you guys can see on the table, we have a bunch of different optics here. And like I said at the intro, we're not going to necessarily dive in depth into each one, but I thought there was some value in showing you the different versions of optics that you could run on your different platforms. And again, this is pretty much any rifle platform that you might have. So without talking anymore, let's get into that. Up here on this 7.5 inch 300 blackout upper, we have a LPVO, that stands for low powered variable optic. A lot of folks like to run these. They are a little bit more expensive, and whenever I'm running something like this, I'm typically running a micro dot offset on a 45 degree. So that's an option that a lot of people end up running. And then you also have, like I stated there, the micro dots like this Sightmark, this Mini Shot M-Spec, or this Holosun HE508T. That's another micro that you'll find on the market. So those are viable options for something like this 5 inch 300 blackout. Some of you may have read up on holographic red dots like this Vortex UH1 Gen 2. EOTech makes holographic red dots as well. You can see I have a magnifier behind this particular one. And then we also have the Crossfire red dot right here, which is kind of like an aim point style red dot. So a lot of you have heard of the aim points. You've seen Crossfires like this, or maybe you've heard of Holosun. Holosun has a bunch of different red dots like that as well. So that's another option, running something low like this. And then the Crossfire from Vortex also comes with a lower third co-witness mount as well, which is what you would run on a lot of different AR-15 platforms. And then some of you may even be running iron sights like you see on this Galil, and that's another viable option. So there's a lot of different optics and a lot of different ways to aim guns out on the market. But a lot of people end up coming back to a red dot because a red dot is a phenomenal optic for any kind of a defensive platform that you're not necessarily concerned about accuracy at great distances. You're more concerned about quick target acquisition, something that has a lot of battery life. It's rugged, durable, waterproof, and it doesn't have a huge learning curve when you're starting to get out there on the range. And previously on my TS12 and a couple other guns, I've run the old SPARC AR from Vortex. And like I said a second ago, my all-time favorite red dot from Vortex was always the Crossfire. So these two optics have performed really well in my arsenal. And when Vortex reached out to us and said that they wanted to send one of the first SPARC Solar red dots, I got extremely excited because this is essentially an updated version, at least from what I'm reading, of the SPARC AR. So like I said at the beginning, we're going to actually unpack this thing right now, hold them up to each other, the old SPARC AR versus the SPARC Solar, and we're going to dive into some of these specs. So let's do that right now. And we'll also discuss what's in this box so that you guys know what it comes with. So inside the box here, we obviously have our manual. That's going to come with everything. We have some kind of a tool there. And right here we have the optic. Now, as you can see here with this optic, as I pull it out, it is in the the low mount style. So this would not be how you would run it with something like an AR-15. Let's just get these caps out of here. This is how you would run it if you're gonna run it on something like a Galil, and I'll just show you that real quick. So the reason we run the low mounts on something like this is because the receiver drops down to the pistol brace or the stock, whereas an AR-15, we end up running the riser because it's pretty much flat across the top. We gotta get that optic up high to be in line with our eye. So it comes with that low mount, and then it also has the lower third co-witness mount here, and we'll just open that up for you guys. So that's pretty slick. And that's something that I always liked about the Crossfire red dots, is the fact that it came with the lower third co-witness mount. And again, it's just 4 screws on the bottom there, and we will be able to mount that right up. But it's very simple. It looks very much like the other Crossfire and the SPARC AR. The cool thing is you can't even hardly tell that there's solar on top. It just has the Vortex logo there. Very sleek design. And one of the cool things about this is it's supposedly lighter weight than the old SPARC AR. I can't really tell in my hand. I guess it does feel a little bit lighter, but it does look like a little bit more sleek of a design. So one of the things that I wanted to run through real quick was just a little bit of the specs on this, and I may refer to the box somewhat, but there's some things with the SPARC AR, the old version, that I really didn't like a lot, and one of them was the mount. And as I already talked about, this mount you can remove and you can switch it out. On the SPARC AR, the original one, it was an absolute co-witness mount. This is one piece on the body, and there was a little spacer if you wanted to make it a lower third mount. So they've obviously switched that up a little bit. On the SPARC AR, it took a AAA battery, which I wasn't opposed to at all. It seemed to get pretty good battery life. It's advertised at 50,000 hours, I believe. This new SPARC Solar is advertised at 150,000 hours with a CR2032 battery on, I think, setting 6. So that's a ton of battery life in this red dot. The other thing that this has is the DTEC, which is auto-detecting motion. And again, I'm just speaking to the specs that are advertised. I haven't used it yet, but that means that when this one falls asleep, all you have to do is move the gun and it's gonna power on. And we'll definitely test that as we get further along in the range day and as I do more reviews of it down the road on the Keystone Carry page. The thing I didn't like about the SPARC AR is the fact that it fell asleep after about 12 hours and then you had to hit the buttons to turn it back on. And that's fine, it's not the end of the world. There's a lot of optics out there that are like that, but you have to remember to turn the optic back on. If you forget and you need your gun, the optic's gonna be off. The other thing that I didn't particularly like about the SPARC AR is the fact that the buttons are on the back and they're not the easiest to use. One little pleasant fact about the SPARC Solar is it appears that the buttons are on the side, and that may allow it to be adjusted up or down easier when you're running a magnifier or wearing gloves or something like that. And again, I'm excited to try that out. As far as the clarity, just looking through the optic, everything looks fine. It looks pretty much the same as the SPARC AR and the Crossfire. Clarity between the two, very good. The one thing we did notice as we unboxed it is the lens on the outside here looks like it's tilted a little bit, and at first we thought it might be an issue, and I'll reach out to Vortex to confirm, but it also shows it just like that in the little manual here. So more than likely there's a reason for why they did that. I just don't know what that is, but it did give me pause a little bit as soon as I opened the box up and checked this thing out. And like I said, we're taking you guys along with us right here. This is the first time I've put my hands on it. One of the other things that I noticed here on the Optic is it no longer has caps for the turrets. They're simply exposed, and it did come with a little tool to make adjustments. When you look at the Crossfire red dot or the older version of the SPARC AR that I have here, there were little caps, and when you unscrew these little caps, you have your tool built into the top where you can make adjustments to your actual windage and elevation. So that's a little bit unique with that being exposed on the top like that. I don't think that that's necessarily good or bad. Maybe that may allow weather penetration or water, but I'm sure that it's watertight. Time will tell, but that is a little bit different change that they made to this particular optic going from the SPARC AR to the SPARC Solar. As I stated, this is a 2032 battery, which I actually like because it's consistent then with most of my other optics. And with this tool, you'll be able to just take apart the tray here, put a 2032 battery in, and you can change the battery without affecting your zero, which is a big deal. Not necessarily as prevalent in the world of rifle optics, but you definitely see that with micro optics on handguns. There's a lot of companies that still, for whatever reason, put the battery in the bottom and you can't get it out without affecting the zero of your pistol. And when you change the battery, you've effectively got to re-zero your gun. So what I'm realizing just looking at this optic is it feels like a highly refined SPARC AR right out of the box. It feels lighter. It has a little bit more versatility with the fact that you can switch the mount out very easily. And it has a lot of similarities to the Crossfire red dot. But before I can actually give you guys a first impression of this, I really need to run this thing on the range. So what we're going to do is get this thing set up on the lower third co-witness mount. We're going to get it on my 12.5-inch Xeon 15, head down to our 50-yard range and get it zeroed up. And then we're going to end up back here on the range doing a ton of different drills and B-roll, running this thing hard so we can give you guys a better idea of what we think about this thing and our true first impression of the SPARC Solar. The SPARC Solar is now set up on my 12.5-inch Xeon 15. And what we did is opted to go for a 50-yard zero for now on this particular build. A lot of people ask us questions about how far to zero a different red dot, what calibers, all that stuff. And it totally depends on the caliber, barrel length, and your uses of your particular build. We're not going to dive into all of that today. Just letting you know that we did end up settling on a 50-yard zero for now. It's going to work for what we're trying to do here. So as far as first impressions after zeroing, I only have a very basic opinion of this red dot at this point. I can't tell you yet if I love it, hate it, if it needs changes or whatever. So far, it's done pretty good. I'm happy with it. The clicks are very audible, very clear. Some cheaper red dots are very mushy. You can't really tell when you've made a click. I really don't like that. But with this particular red dot, it clicks fine, very easy to adjust. As far as the glass clarity, it's on par with all of my other red dots from Vortex. There's no weird reflections or anything, no glares, nothing out of whack, very clear, no fuzziness, nothing like that. One of the things that I will say is I do have an astigmatism in my eye, so when I talk about dot clarity, I'm not necessarily the best one to be telling you, is it a perfectly circled dot? I'm just not. My eyes have some issues, and for that reason, I can't tell you how crisp the dot is. A lot of people like to talk about that. But the clarity of the glass I can talk about, and it seems to be just fine. There's no weird reflections or anything in there. Every once in a while, if you tilt your head just right, you can catch a little bit of that red tint. But one of the things that I was looking at with the diode itself is that I didn't get any weird internal reflections in that ring that you're looking through. Some of the cheaper red dots I've used in the past, if you tilted your head just right, or if you pointed it up into the sunlight, or you had overhead lighting, you'd get a really goofy reflection, and I really didn't like that. But none of that with this optic. It seems to be doing great. But at the end of the day, the only way that I'm really gonna tell if I love this thing or not is to actually get out and use it. The last thing that I'm going to point out is I did have some issues with the little tool, the adjuster tool, which you see right here. It is plastic. I ended up breaking the little screwdriver piece off. I don't know if that was me or because it was cold. It's just a plastic tool. So that's why in the B-roll, you probably noticed that I was using some shell casings in the back to make my final adjustments. And then you would have seen that I also threw my 3x magnifier on at 50 yards just to get a little bit more of a precise zero on this. But overall, so far I'm happy with it. But like I said, we need to run this thing on the range, do a bunch of drills, and then I'll be able to give you guys a little bit more of my opinion. Let's dive into that. Yesterday was a pretty good day and I got a really good feel for the SPARC Solar red dot. Now keep in mind, like I said on the range, this was really just us unboxing this, taking you along for our first impression, and then discussing what we learn about this optic at this point. What this video is not going to show you is things like long-term durability or battery life. Those things are going to come in time, and as I said on the range video, I will be doing a full review of this optic down the road once I get a couple weeks or a couple months worth of use out of it on my channel Keystone Carry. So definitely hop over to Keystone Carry and subscribe over there and stay tuned because I will be doing a video eventually on this particular optic. So with that all being said, wrapping this video out, what do I think about this optic as a first impression? I think that it is a solid optic so far. I think Vortex took a lot of the traits that I really like with the Crossfire red dot, and they pulled some of the traits that I liked from the SPARC AR red dot and combined them together into the SPARC Solar. You have the longer battery life with the solar panel, the 150,000 hours of advertised runtime with it on the middle setting. It uses the CR2032 battery just like the Crossfire. No longer are you running a AAA battery like the SPARC AR was. I like the fact that it has a removable base and it's a lower 1/3 co-witness mount. That was one of my biggest gripes with the SPARC AR red dot, is the fact that it's a one-piece body and the only choices you have are either absolute co-witness or lower third co-witness. And if you're running a different platform like, say, a Galil, you're not going to be able to run this red dot properly because you can't change the base. So I think it was a smart move for Vortex to go to this style of a mount with the SPARC Solar. The one thing that I did find out from Vortex, I talked to them this morning, if you remember on the range, I did mention that I noticed that the front lens was canted, and they did confirm that that is intentional, and they do have information and a podcast where they discuss the why behind the cant on that front lens. And I will link that podcast in the description here if I can find it. The other thing that I didn't know if I would like about with this red dot is the turrets. They don't have a cap anymore, and you have to use their little tool or a little flat screwdriver or something to turn them. And my question with this is water penetration over time. Is that going to become an issue? I don't know. Probably not. I'm assuming that they probably did their due diligence. It's all sealed up and all of that good stuff. It's probably not going to be an issue. I actually do really like the caps that are on the Crossfire. Now, I will say that this is way more streamlined. So as far as bulk, this one takes the cake and it's definitely the winner. The little caps definitely stick out. There's little nubs on both the Crossfire and on the old SPARC AR. Adjusting it's fine. I like the fact that it has buttons on the side instead of a dial. That's probably one of my only gripes about the Crossfire red dot, is the fact that you have to turn the dial, but that is very quick. That is one of the bonuses of a dial. But they definitely took all of my favorite traits between both the Crossfire and the SPARC AR and put them into the SPARC Solar. It feels like a really solid red dot. I'm excited to explore it more. Just keep in mind, this is a first review, first impression video. Stay tuned, check out our Instagram, make sure you're following us there because we will be releasing more and more content with this optic as we go forward. Guys, if you liked this video, definitely leave us a comment below and let us know what you think about the SPARC Solar. If you found this video helpful, please give us a thumbs up. Make sure you're following me over at my page, Keystone Carry, because that is where I will drop a full in-depth review of the SPARC Solar down the road. Guys, we appreciate you tuning into this video. If you like Box to Bullseye, definitely send it over to a friend, send a link out, share it with your friends and your buddies, spread the word about it because we're going to be running a lot more gear, not just guns, but optics, flashlights, and other kit in the near future. We appreciate you guys. We'll see you in the next one.